Hello there folks, I'm Dan Brown from Sort of Interesting, and today you're joining me for the first episode of The World According to Dan, where I am actually, for the first time ever, really properly sharing some of my worldview and some of my thoughts and feelings about different topics and different things in the world. So for the first episode we're going to get stuck in with an absolutely massive topic, which is money, and my view on money and my attitude towards money and how I handle money. Now, it's important to say at the start of this video that this is in no way, shape or form any sort of financial advice. This is just my view that I'm just sharing with you, so don't base any life decisions on anything that I ever say, and that's a good rule for any of my videos. But it's also very important to say that I've lived an unusual life. I've lived on a boat for 4 years and all sorts of different stuff like that. And just to prove how unusual I am, I've got in my hand a book from 2004 where I was writing this is quite literally what this says, 2004 Finances of Daniel Brown, and the first heading here is Economic Policy. And then I go on for pages and pages to outline and give loads of different tables and examples and graphs of my sort of monetary policy, I suppose. So that's from 2004 when I'm 16, 17 at the absolute maximum. So that shows, as I'm 30 now, how far back my real sort of grip on money and my real general worldview and sort of approach to being on top of the financial situation of my life and trying to set myself up to not have to be concerned and not be worried about monetary things goes back basically as far back as then. So basically, I have a few basic principles when it comes to money, and this will hopefully help to explain how I live in a nice top floor apartment, call it a flat if you're normal, and have a nice comfortable life. But as people like to point out on the internet, why would you do that when you only work in a supermarket? Well, this will hopefully answer those questions. So I've got a few pages here written just for this particular video. So now it's important to say that not everybody's in a situation where they can live the way that I live and what have you. So this is in no way, shape or form any sort of judgment. This is just me who's always been really on top of this sort of thing and sort of always from a very, very early age been determined to have absolutely no debt. And I'm happy to say at this point, at age 30, I've never had one single penny of debt of any description. I've never borrowed money from family or friends or anything like that, and in fact it's been the other way around where I've actually lent money to friends and stuff that they've then paid me back at a later date. So I'm very, very pleased. That's my one thing that I would say I'm very happy to have sort of got this far in my life. Now, the only debt that I really sort of view as acceptable to me is having a mortgage at some point in the future, because obviously it's very difficult in the modern world, especially as a single person, to suddenly come up with like £180,000 out of thin air to buy a house with, or come up with £180,000 over years and years of saving to buy a house with debt free. So that is the one thing that I will accept is that's an acceptable debt, the way that I view the world and the way that I try and live my own life. So basically my various sort of rules, and we'll get to expenses and stuff in a second. Obviously the no debt rule, so there's good examples of that and how I've practiced that in my life, mainly when I bought my narrowboat. Now, the boat that I lived on for 4 years was only a small boat. She cost 11 grand, and I could have had a loan for that much at the drop of a hat and gone out and bought a boat as soon as I'd had the idea of buying a boat. But this is where the no debt rule is important and why I have that rule. If I'd have got a loan to buy the boat, I would have then had, obviously, the loan repayments as an inbuilt every month cost of my life going forward, which sort of totally would have defeated the purpose of me buying a boat in the first place, which was to live a low-cost lifestyle where I didn't have to worry about much and I could live as simply and as cheaply as I possibly could, minimise the amount of time that I had to spend at work, and then just go out enjoying the boat life that I did. And because I didn't have any debt, and because I wasn't thousands of pounds in the hole basically, I was able to minimise my working hours to part-time and very often take a lot of unpaid leave over some of the time when I was living on the boat, and actually really get stuck into enjoying living a really natural, simple lifestyle and spending the vast majority of my time out in the countryside. And that was based on the no debt rule. And instead, it took me a couple of years to save up the money, but I bought my boat and I went into boat life totally free of all real sort of bindings and all real concerns of a monetary nature. So that's why the no debt rule exists. But it's also why I have a rule of I would rather wait and save up to buy something, whether that would be a laptop or a phone or what have you. I would rather buy something outright. And this sort of, I suppose, ties in with phone contracts. I would rather buy a phone outright and just buy the phone and then have a really cheap phone contract, rather than buy a phone at a much lower price but have a much more expensive monthly phone contract. Because firstly, if I want to sell that phone, then I buy it and then I can sell it and that's the end of it, and I'm not still paying for an expensive phone contract if I don't like the phone or what have you. Equally, I've seen people sort of use what I think is a bit of a false argument to talk about buying phones on contracts, where they say, yeah, but I upgrade every year or every other year and it doesn't cost me anything, blah, blah, blah. Whereas I'm looking at, I'm thinking, you're upgrading a phone every year to a phone that you don't need and a phone that's barely any better than the one that you've already got. And you're saying that somehow makes it more valuable to spend that extra money on your monthly contract and keep that perpetual expense going. Whereas I look at it, I think, well, I'd rather buy one phone and use that for years on end and then upgrade it if I feel that there's something valuable from a new phone that can warrant me spending that new money on a new phone, rather than going, well, I'm just going to get a new phone anyway every year and pay a really extortionate phone contract. And that again is that way of, well, it might look on paper, oh, you get new phones and all that, but you're spending more money to get that new phone, rather than how I operate in buying a phone, using it, and then maybe at some point in the future going, yeah, a couple of years down the line I will upgrade. Of course, I did happen to throw quite a few phones and cameras in the canal. Only one phone, actually, over my years on the boat. So, again, that's just a simple thing, very simple rule. And hopefully it goes some way to, again, explaining the way that I operate and the way that I try and buy stuff outright and not be worrying about paying it back. So you get that item, if you don't like it or for any reason you need to sell it, you get the money back or you get some of the money back, but you don't have an ongoing repayment that's going on that's basically making the money you get back a bit of a false item, because you haven't really paid that money out in the first place and you're still paying that money monthly out to the loan, to contracts and so on. Oh man, this is a technical video that I'm trying not to be too long-winded and boring about, but at 8 minutes I'm not doing too well. So equally, I have a very strict policy of recording everything that I spend and categorising it. So I have got, for the last few years, I've got a spreadsheet that literally has thousands upon thousands of data entry fields and cells filled in, that goes for years and years of my monthly expenditure, breaking down every item that I've bought and basically categorising like food, supplies, junk food, boat costs, this cost, that cost, bills, all of that sort of stuff. So I can literally go back and look month by month, day by day, how much did I spend here, how much did this cost me, how much did that cost me, and I can figure out exactly what I'm doing financially compared to what I've got incoming. So that's something that I really believe in strongly, and actually being sort of hyper aware of your financial situation. So that's, again, something that it's difficult to get into, but once I started it properly, now it's second nature to make sure that I note down in these running spreadsheets everything that I spend. And I've got literally, as I say, thousands and thousands of cells filled in a spreadsheet that's got 13 separate categories and 13 separate sheets, workbooks, whatever you want to call them, with all sorts of stuff, from obviously different financial things to savings to gold price tracker and stuff like that, all sorts of stuff, because I love numbers and tinkering around with spreadsheets and automatic calculations. Really nerdy, I know. So those are three of my main rules. Like, be extremely aware of your financial situation and record stuff. Don't get, certainly my view, like you say, is don't buy stuff on contracts and stuff if possible, and don't buy stuff with loans and things like that where possible, and basically save and buy outright rather than then have to worry about paying stuff back, and then in a year's time, if you get something else on a contract, add in another monthly payment on. It's like, I prefer to know exactly where I stand and to own stuff outright. Equally, another big rule is don't rely on friends or family or anything like that for financial input. And I'm happy to say, as I say, I've never owed any money and I've never taken any money towards anything. And this is something that's important to note in my land lifestyle, which is a lot more expensive to when I was on the boat. But equally, it's very important to note that something like the boat itself, when I paid 11 grand for the boat, which is by far the most expensive thing I've ever bought, the financial input that I had from my family was this: £20 off my mum to stop at a pub and have a meal on the way back when I first was fetching my boat from where I bought it from, and also £20 off my dad with similar stipulations. So on that 11 grand purchase, I had a £40 input. I wish I had a 40 grand input. So that's all part of the basic principle of not relying, because I would say if my family had ever given me like thousands of pounds to give to get something, then obviously I couldn't afford that thing in the first place, and by my standards, I probably therefore shouldn't be buying it. So that's the way that I view it, like I say, and that's how I try and operate. So basically, don't rely on sort of friendly loans or donations or gifts of that nature to be like, right, this is how I'm going to live and what have you. So that's just a general overview of my very brief, simple rules in a very simplified layout there. Now, when it comes to the actual cost of living and my day-to-day spending and things like that, now, this is probably one of the things that people will be most interested in who watch my videos regularly. So when I had the boat, it cost me hardly anything. It cost me like 1,000 to 1.5 grand a year to run the boat. That I can blast through in 2 months living where I do now. Now, my living costs, I would say my running costs, my sort of standard life costs of things that people would expect as a minimum way of life. So outside of food, I would say this is, and maybe outside of food and entertainment, my living costs are actually less than £650 a month. So that includes rent, council tax, electric bills, water bills, mobile phone bills, broadband and TV licence. And I'd say that the mobile, broadband and TV licence, all things that I'd say are definitely non-essential in emergency circumstances, make up about 10% or maybe just over 10%, so 65 quid of that monthly total. So you could easily wipe out those things and knock you down to well under £600 a month living costs, minus food and so on. So the way that, now there's some people I suppose that will hear that and go, oh, I can't believe compared to when you're on the boat, that's ludicrous expenses to have. And there's some people who will hear that as a basic living cost and think, flipping heck, how does he live so cheaply and all the rest of it. Now, it's important to note that where I live in this particular flat, it's a lot more expensive. It's well over £100 more expensive than some of the places I could have chosen to live in town. And the reason that I chose to live here is because it was somewhere that I actually wanted to live here. And after 4 years of a very, very basic boat life, I thought I'm going to treat myself and live almost like a ludicrously luxurious life, to have proper heating that comes on with a flick of a switch rather than having to light the fire with firelighters. And again, that's obviously an exaggeration, but just to live here, top of a beautiful old building, have a balcony overlooking the town, lovely place to live, absolutely wonderful, love it here. And to me, I thought I would rather treat myself and spend that extra £100 to £130 a month maybe extra over where I could be living in town to live here, rather than live somewhere cheaper and not absolutely love living where I live. So again, something like that I can afford to do because of the following reasons. I don't drive, so I cut out all of the costs of purchasing a car, of running a car, petrol, road tax, and obviously the endless maintenance and things like the ongoing costs of maintenance, not endless, apologies. I don't drink, I don't smoke, and I don't do drugs. So those are three things that all can cost a fortune to different people, and a lot of people can vouch for that fact. Those are four things that I don't have any outgoings on whatsoever. So the money that I might have spent on a car, and then some, I would rather spend living somewhere that I absolutely love living day after day after day. And I'll do a proper video. In fact, my next video might be specifically about not having a car and being a grown-up. So that might prove interesting, and share a few thoughts on how it's not as big a deal as some people believe it is, and the ideas of, but I've got my freedom with a car, and so on. So we'll talk about that in a proper video very soon. Now I'm going to desperately try and keep this video below 20 minutes, as it's really getting long at this point. Now, basically, if we look at things like my electric and water bills, the water bill is here in this building is a rolling 6 month sort of bill. So it's not like a quarterly or anything, it's literally twice a year. The last one for 6 months was £88.75. So round that up, say what, £170 maybe thereabouts, maybe a bit more, £180 a year, call it, for water. And my last 3 month electric bill was coming out of the cold months of the winter into the spring. So it's a good sort of mixture of months and heating usage and stuff like that. But that 3 month bill was £132.57. So again, you're talking about nothing majorly dramatic and wildly over the top. So it is literally my rent and council tax that are the massive, massive outgoings that I have. And then pretty much nothing else on top of that. So that's just a few things and a few thoughts on how I live so cheaply. And obviously then when you look at that, you can see how I work in a supermarket, I do part-time hours, and I sort of vary it. At the start of the year, I was treating myself to some unpaid leave as well, to just have a few holidays while I was really knuckling down writing a lot of books, which again, this is where my lifestyle and affordability and how I live where I live and don't have to worry too much about massive financial burdens or anything comes into play. That basically, I would say £650, add on maybe £100. It's the really difficult one to say how much does food cost and that. I should have gone back and looked at my spreadsheets and got a specific total for that, but it's not like I'm having steak dinners or anything like that every night. So my living costs are really minimal. So that's how, as I say, I live simply and cheaply, despite being in much grander dwellings than my boat life and my tiny little boat was. So looking at my expenses and viewing how much I spend per month, you can see how I can sort of control and regulate, oh, do I want to hold back on this, or oh, I've spent a bit too much. And then obviously looking at my actual real job in a supermarket, I can decide, oh, do I want to work an extra day? Do I want to do a few extra days this month? And I try and view things rather than week to week as more of like a sort of month to month basis, because obviously things can change. You might have an unexpected cost this month or that month or this week or that week. And you can micromanage too much. So even though I say be hyper aware, I try not to be hyper sort of concerned in hitting exact goals from day to day and week to week. And I'd say really I'd view things in a 3 month sort of quarterly thing where I can obviously look more broadly at, oh, I've spent a bit too much here, or I've spent a lot less than I expected there, and sort of have a rolling view on the situation and getting a grasp of things where I can then go, right, next month I want to do X amount of extra days at work to cover these costs, or I want to work on a book this month so I can afford to try and drop a couple of days here and there. And again, it's that rolling sort of thing to really figure out exactly when and where and how to spend money and time, I suppose, and how to manage income as well as outgoings. So it's important as well to note, in terms of keeping life cheap, that my basic hobbies are, I've got, I'd say, probably 5 basic hobbies. So we would talk obviously about walking and biking, being outdoors, getting into the countryside. That's my main love. That's what I love to do. And that obviously costs very little, and especially the walking. It's like a new pair of boots every year or every other year if I'm feeling stingy, and can literally cost basically as much as the drinks and food that you take out walking into the countryside. So that's a practically zero cost thing. I was lucky as well for Mango Bikes to give me a gift of 2 bikes for free as well at one point a couple of years ago. So that cost me, the cycling cost me even less than it would cost if I'd had to buy that one bike for years to come. Then the only real expensive hobby, or the only real proper hobby that can be expensive, I would say, is actually playing games and PC gaming and stuff like that. But after buying that initial laptop that I bought last year in the end of my boat life, I spend very little actually on games, and recently picked up about 4 games for, I think it was maybe about £11-12 or so, and those games will last me for months on end now. So that's, again, there's going to be months now to come where I don't spend a single penny on gaming. So again, it's a difficult one to really knuckle down how much does that cost me, but it's not as much after that initial purchase as you may expect. And then my other 2 hobbies are YouTube and writing. Now, writing can take up a vast amount of my time, and obviously writing is something that, even though I don't sell millions of books or anything wild, it does actually make a little bit of money. So again, it's something that I love to do, and it's something that takes up a great deal of my time. It's a big hobby of mine, and yet, rather than being an expense, it's actually on the income side of things. So that's obviously something that helps out and helps top up my actual real life job and proper job, it's income. And equally the same with YouTube. Now, obviously I don't do many videos compared to what I used to do, and YouTube's advertising and stuff's always changing and how they work it out, so I would never choose to rely on an income from writing and YouTube. But the fact that it's there at all for any amount of time is definitely helpful, and definitely helps to keep topping up my general income. So those are 2 things that I can spend a lot of time doing and really thoroughly enjoy, yet they actually make a bit of money coming in, which is, again, an important thing to explain when people are saying, how do you afford to live and all this? And I'm like, well, most of my hobbies don't cost me any money, and 2 of the things that I love doing, like videos of the countryside and writing, actually fetch money in. So it's not like I'm constantly out like drinking or doing things that just burn money like no tomorrow. What I spend a lot of my time doing is actually generating money as a side effect. That's how I would view it. I don't look at writing and YouTube as a way to make money. I look at it as stuff that I love to do, and if people are interested and want to watch videos, or people are going to actually read my books, then wow, that's amazing, and it all helps out. So again, when I always promote my books at the end of these things, there's a reason, because man alive, it's very helpful. So that's just, again, another glimpse into my life and how my life is, and how I sort of live this very low cost lifestyle, even though now my outgoings are vastly increased compared to the boat. They're still nowhere near what a lot of people have when they've got cars and things like that going on, or their interests are things that cost a lot of money, or their interests are going on holiday abroad and stuff frequently. Because I'm not worrying about that sort of expenditure, I can actually have all of this time to like say, oh, I don't want to have to work full-time hours, I don't want to have to do this, don't want to have to do that, and I can go out and enjoy my time and enjoy being in the great outdoors and doing the stuff that I love far more frequently than I might be able to in other circumstances. So, I know this video's gone on for a very long time. As much as I love to be on top of things financially and hyper aware of my financial situation, I also have got on my final page of show notes, don't get stupid, but also don't let this stuff rule your life. And it's important to not become obsessed, I think, personally, with saving every penny and, oh, don't do this, don't do that, because you could start to make an argument to yourself that almost every penny you spend that isn't on food and shelter is wasted money. And that, I think, it would make it pointless in earning anything over the exact minimum that you would need to live. So, whereas, obviously, don't let this stuff rule your life. So, for me, that is expressed in 2 examples, and that's when I sold my narrowboat there were two things I'd wanted for a long, long time, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to take this as an opportunity to actually buy them. And basically, one of them was my Alienware laptop, which is ludicrously powerful, over-the-top gaming laptop with all stupid colour-changing lights on it, and again, over-the-top ludicrous stuff. That's something that I'd wanted for probably about 11 or 12 years from when I first was going to get one, and I thought, you know what, this is the chance, let's just get it. And equally, for about 2 years since the Apple Watch was announced and launched, I became fascinated by wristwatches and mechanical watches. And so I'd originally planned on buying something like a Rolex Explorer or one of the smaller Rolex Oyster Perpetuals. But in the end, I ended up buying a Tudor Black Bay, if I can try and get that angled in the shot. Absolutely beautiful watch, and after seeing them all in real life, this was the one that I wanted. And I also thought, if the money I saved by getting this rather than the Rolex, perhaps I'll buy something like a Nomos or an Oris or something like that as well, as a second watch to go with it. But it took me so long to choose which watch I wanted to buy that this watch actually wasn't even announced and unveiled when I first started looking for a watch. So it's going to take me possibly another year to choose another watch. But again, that's something that I intend to have for the rest of my life. So purchasing this watch, again, this is probably the second most expensive thing I've ever bought after the boat. But it's something that I thoroughly enjoy having and putting on every day, and hearing the balance wheel and the escapement ticking over and stuff. It's a beautiful thing that I absolutely love. And it's something that I got a lot of flack for when I posted the video on it. And again, I just thought, after living the most basic lifestyle that I did for 4 years, and suddenly it's like I've bought myself one real sort of luxury item and I became the worst person in the world. That brings us back to the don't get stupid rule here, where I can treat myself once in a lifetime to something like this and be quite happy and quite sort of pleased with that. But if I was going out trying to buy one of these every month and not substantially upping my income, then that would be a very, very stupid move, to say the least. So again, it's all, I suppose, about, well, this is my view at least, is being very aware, being sensible. And again, sensible is a very subjective word that can mean a lot of different things to different people. But ultimately, I view the world in this very simple way of don't get stupid, but also don't let this stuff rule your life. And I think that's it, really. So, ultimately, now that I've just worn these glasses and feel a bit dizzy taking them off for half an hour plus recording this video, I apologise, but if you've made it this far into watching this video, thank you so much for giving me so much of your time. Have an absolutely fantastic day. If you're interested, feel free to add me on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, Snapchat. And please do consider checking out my short books for the Kindle, all about my life on a boat. And I've got a short story written about a cat getting trapped on a boat called the Chirk Canal Cat. And, well, there's even a paperback collection of my boat books as well. So check the links in the description to find all of that stuff. And, well, until the next time, keep it monetary policy worthy, keep it interesting. And, of course, my friends, have a fantastic day and farewell.